All right, so Eddie Hearn, who's one of the biggest boxing promoters on the planet, he was on an MMA show yesterday and he was talking about how MMA, mixed martial arts, is pretty much the poor relative compared to boxing, that all the searches online by the kids are all for boxing, that all the superstars are for boxing, that he can't even name any superstars in the world of mixed martial arts, and that basically MMA is a bit old, it's a bit tired, and it's going nowhere. Listen, Eddie Hearn, as I said, he's a good guy, he's an incredible promoter. And he's a boxing promoter, okay? So, of course, he's going to say these things. Now, if he was talking to an MMA person, if he was, and if Eddie Hearn said, like, there's not even 6 stars in MMA right now, you would have thought that maybe the MMA guy would have said, hold on, let me educate you. But first of all, let's listen to Eddie Hearn.
Boxing's on fire right now. It's controlling all the narrative digitally across social media on a far different level to MMA and UFC right now.
It's not controlling all the narrative, and it is not being searched way more by all the kids on social media and online. Of course, last weekend we had Chris Eubank Jr. taking on Nigel Benn. That was phenomenal. What an event that was. I said it's one of the best boxing fights I've ever seen, but that was kind of a once-in-a-lifetime situation. You had Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank, who were rivals in the 90s and two of the biggest British boxing superstars that the sport's ever seen. And then their two kids, about 30 years later, get into boxing, hate each other, they square up, one of them cracks an egg around the other one's face. Chris Eubank Sr. brands his son a disgrace.
That's disgraceful.
Then he shows up at the arena with 65,000 people who absolutely lose their mind, and then the fight was phenomenal. So yeah, maybe right now the Google searches are in favor of boxing. That's because you just had that wild event, okay? And it was phenomenal. Well done. Congrats to everybody involved and of course the two fighters. But as I say, that was a once in a lifetime situation. Let's listen to some more.
MMA, and you know, I know
Tell us.
it's a poor relative. But it's not.
It's a poor relative. It's just a poor relative. It really is. Well, listen, if you think about the history of boxing, which has literally been around for hundreds of years, it is an Olympic sport. It used to be taught in schools. Boxing's ingrained in the culture of almost every human being. Everybody knows what boxing is because it was around before anyone on this planet even existed, before they even lived. There's been so many tremendous movies, films, TV shows, documentaries about incredible fighters like Mike Tyson, like Muhammad Ali. I mean, the list really goes on. MMA has only been around for 30 or so years. The first UFC event was in 1993. So we've been having to play catch up. And by the way, I'm not sitting here trying to shit on boxing. I'm a boxing fan. I love boxing. I thoroughly enjoyed that event last weekend. But I've got to stick up for MMA a little bit.
But it's not their fault, really, what's happening. I'm sure people will feel like they could have done some things different. It's just a bit tired, isn't it? It's really down to the actual product, which is the fights.
It's a little bit tired. Let's be honest. I mean, come on. What are you talking about? The production levels at a UFC event compared to an average boxing event, it's day and night. And the focus is on the fights. Now, we know right now, a lot of the big boxing fights, they lose money. That's why Turkey Al-Sheikh has had to come in. And that's why most of the biggest fights are going down in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, last weekend that was in London, of course, because of the big British story. But of course, Turkey Al-Sheikh was still there. Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk, they're all taking place in Saudi Arabia, okay? Whereas the UFC is literally flying all over the world, including Saudi Arabia. They're in Azerbaijan, they're in Sydney, they're in England, they're in America, Canada, Brazil, Mexico. The list goes on. It is a worldwide phenomenon. Anyway, let's carry on.
Like if you said to me now, name me 6 UFC superstars.
Hold on. Name me 6 UFC superstars. Whoever's conducting this interview right there, if they're an MMA guy, you would have thought that they would have interjected and said, hold on, you want 6 MMA superstars? We could name some off the top of my head. I don't know. John Jones, Tom Aspinall, Dricus du Plessis, Islam Makhachev, Ilia Topuria, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Paddy Pimblett, Nate Diaz, Hamzat Chimaev.
5 minutes later.
Max Holloway. Who else? Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou, by the way, who took on Tyson Fury in his first ever boxing fight, dropped him and almost beat him on the scorecards. There's a few superstars for you. I mean, if you're talking about boxing superstars, right now, all right, you've got Canelo Alvarez, you've got Tyson Fury, you've got Anthony Joshua, Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Tank Davis, Alexander Usyk.
I'm Phil.
Right? I'm not the biggest boxing nerd, but that's about it off the top of my head. Maybe there's 1 or 2 others. Maybe there's some people that I'm forgetting, and I don't do that on purpose. But as I say, I can think of more MMA superstars right now, and I'm sure that the younger generation can reel off more MMA superstars than boxing superstars.
I couldn't do it. I could give you the ones that seem to keep losing quite a bit and then just come back.
Give you the ones that seem to keep losing quite a bit. I mean, who's he referring to there? I don't know. I mean, Alex Pereira just got beat. You've got Dustin Poirier, I guess, who's having his final fight soon against Max Holloway. And yeah, they have lost a few fights here and there. Nate Diaz has lost a few fights as well. But this is a great thing about mixed martial arts. And I'll say this, the great thing about the fan base as well, when you lose one fight, it's not over. You don't get kicked to the curb. You don't get forgotten about. Yeah, of course, as the sport's got bigger and social media is a thing, you do have to deal with a lot of fans talking a lot of shit, but that just goes with the situation. When you take risks, when you put yourself out there. In fact, I shared a video yesterday of Chris Eubank Sr. on my Instagram, and he's talking about that. If you don't take risks in life, basically you're nothing. And if you're man enough to put your dreams out there for people to scoff at, then they're going to talk a bit of shit.
If you place your dreams in front of the crowd, as we do, you risk ridicule. If you go forward in the face of overwhelming odds, you risk failure. But risk must be taken, for the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, has nothing, does nothing, is nothing.
And if you're a fan and you're tuning in and you're cheering for the fighter's opponent and they win, then yeah, all right, they're going to talk a little bit of shit. Anyway, let's have some more from Eddie Hearn. I got no problem with Eddie Hearn, by the way. If you see this, Eddie, keep doing what you're doing.
I don't think I think it's just cyclical, with the talent. The problem is with UFC, they always want the brand to be bigger, their brand to be bigger than that of the fighter. And when a star like Conor McGregor comes around, everything changes. And I don't think they really like that.
See, I didn't even mention Conor McGregor because Conor McGregor's not really active right now. We could have thrown in Conor McGregor and a bunch of other great superstars from back in the day, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz. Of course, you can do that with boxing, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather. To be honest, it's kind of stupid to do that. We can always come up with these endless comparisons. And of course, boxing has got a far steeper history. And I have so much respect for anyone that steps foot in the ring. But anyway, let's have some more. Let's see where this ends up.
Call me deluded or whatever, but those guys, in my opinion, won't be able to lace my boots in boxing promotion. Now, as a business, as an organisation, as UFC, unbelievable. But this is different.
All right, well, listen, Dana White is getting into the boxing world, so we'll find out whether or not he can lace his boots. But one thing I do want to say, there's a few points I want to make on this, is that Eddie Hearn probably has the British perception of mixed martial arts and the UFC. What I mean by that is that out here in America, it's pretty much a mainstream sport, just like in Australia and in Brazil. The problem is in the UK, whilst there is tremendously passionate fans, tremendously passionate, some of the best fans in the world, I am so grateful for all those fans that supported me throughout my career, who stayed up live in Manchester to 6 o'clock in the morning to see me fight. We got some of the best fans in the world. However, the sport is on generally in the middle of the night. Out here in America, it starts at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2, 3, 4, depending on the time of the card. It's a mainstream sport. I remember when I first moved out here to America, I sat on the couch, I put the prelims on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, oh my God, this feels like a real sport. You can't really do that in the UK unless the fight's in London, which does happen, of course, and they are big special events, but it's not every weekend like you have with other sports. But out here in America, it pretty much is every single weekend. So I mentioned prelims there, by the way. Who watches the boxing prelims? Right? And again, I am not shitting on boxing, but be honest, right? Who watches the boxing prelims? The MMA fans will watch the prelims. We all know that there's some tremendous fights on the prelims. There's fighters that we recognize. We know their stories. We know their ups and downs of their careers. And we also know the young up and comers, so we want to check them out. We want to see them. And we are blown away by the UFC production, which, by the way, that's what the UFC is all about. It's all about the fights. Now, I'm not sitting here like a company man defending the UFC against Eddie Hearn. I'm sitting here as a mixed martial arts fighter that just took a little bit of, not offense, because I'm not offended, but I just felt felt the need to have to correct a few things here. Now, when it comes to MMA versus boxing, I mean, as we know, boxing is a tremendously skilled art. You take the best boxers on planet Earth, put them in with the best MMA fighters, and you make it boxing only. Of course, the MMA fighters are going to struggle, but you put them in a cage and you let them do whatever they want, or you put them in the street, okay, there's only one person who's going to win. If you were to take 6 superstars from the boxing world and match them with 6 superstars from the MMA world, I know who I'm putting my money on. And here's another sad piece of reality. Some of the biggest stars in the boxing world, the superstars right now, are people like Jake Paul and KSI. They're probably the only young ones that are tuning in. And you know what the real irony of all of this is that he's saying all of this while sitting on a mixed martial arts podcast. As I say, I'm not trying to talk shit with Eddie Hearn. I've got tremendous respect for what he's done in the boxing world. I've met him, I've talked to him. He's a great guy, so I wish him nothing but the best. But as an MMA guy, I had to come out and defend the sport a little bit. If only someone was in the room that knew something about MMA that could have just course corrected the narrative a little bit. Anyway, let me know what you think about that in the comment section, please. Subscribe and ring the bell. I'm going to do a members video right now, so make sure if you're a member, check it out in the morning. You guys take care. As I say, subscribe, ring the bell. Have a great day.